Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle, and this is the Church Planting Podcast. I have the privilege of serving as president of Stadia Church Planting, where at Stadia we believe that every person on the planet deserves to have access to a thriving, growing, multiplying church. Today on the Church Planting Podcast, I'm going to be talking with my good friend Jimmy Santiago Mellado. Jimmy serves today as the president of Compassion International, which is more than a $1 billion not-for-profit. That's absolutely incredible. Jimmy began his ministry career as the leader of the Willow Creek Association. He has tons of business expertise, and today we're going to be talking with Jimmy about how to cast vision and the importance of casting vision in your local church. Let's jump right in with Jimmy Santiago Mellado. Hey everyone, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. Man, I am so excited today because I have my very good friend, partner in ministry, colleague, Jimmy Santiago Mellado, who is the president of Compassion International, on this podcast episode with us. Welcome, Jimmy.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Always life-giving to have a conversation with you. So just thankful for the opportunity. Blessings on you.
Yeah, I wish people could just sit in on our conversations sometimes, Jimmy. Not all the personal ones, but, just we're talking about diversity and the COVID. When are people coming back to work? And all such meaningful stuff that we could talk about.
Yeah, no doubt. Love connecting with you any chance we get to just talk about leadership, life, the church, ministry, planting. So
Stadia has actually partnered. I think we're nearing now 200 church plants in partnership with Compassion International. And I think, Jimmy, we're getting really close, I think, to announcing and celebrating 50,000 children sponsored through the partnership, which is
actually, Greg, can I just say, we just crossed that line. So this is the point of celebration right here, really 50,000 plus children that are being cared for and loved on by local churches that were planted through Stadia. So we've been able to find sponsors with them and just love the partnership, love the connection. And you should probably know that really because of the emphasis in church planting in our partnership, it's actually had a ripple effect of other church plants in Africa and Asia. So all together, 200 with Stadia, but by influence, probably 80 plus other churches that have been planted through the influence of Stadia and our partnership.
And I'm so grateful. That just warms my heart. Just made my day, actually. I'm glad our listeners and viewers get to celebrate that with us. And, I just want you to know, I'm looking forward to the day when you and I can celebrate 1 million children sponsored together through the partnership. And hey, we're gonna get to that. But before we get to where you are today at Compassion, let's talk a little bit about your background. First of all, you grew up not in the United States.
No, did not. In fact, my story actually starts with my mom, of course. She grew up in poverty, so I'm one generation away from poverty. She was born the daughter of migrant farmers on the USA-Mexico border, and they just went where the work was. And she was taught as a little girl to how to keep a dirt floor clean and level. And she had one toy her entire adolescent year, just one toy. But she was a real adventuresome soul. My goodness, she would tell me about the times they would go in and visit the city to get supplies and such. And she loved going into that local store and looking at where things were made and dreaming that someday she could go wherever that country was that said, made in Japan or made in Brazil or whatever. She just dreamed someday, I'd like to go there. And then later on, she met another adventuresome soul, my dad. And they have now been married 63 years. So they're still alive. And in their 63 years of marriage, they moved 41 times. So
wow!
So they truly went around the world and were these two adventuresome souls that went and really served. My dad was an engineer, and so he went around the world building roads and dams and water irrigation systems and powerhouses and electrical distribution systems and things like that. And as an engineer, I'm an engineer as well by education. And by the time I celebrated my first birthday, I had already visited 6 countries. I grew up in 7, 26 different homes, 8 different schools before graduating high school. I mean, I thought it was normal that every family moved every year, and then married a woman that had one house her whole life. I couldn't relate to that.
That's crazy. Now, throughout that time, somehow your dad, though, because we've talked so much, knowing some things about your history and family, your dad was a man of vision, which is our topic today.
Yeah, no, he definitely was. In fact, I was born in the jungles of El Salvador, no doctor, and he was building a dam, powerhouse, and a tunnel, and it just blew me away when I realized, Dad, you were 33 years old when you were entrusted with building this dam, and the powerhouse and the electrical system. And by the way, it's still working today. So it was inaugurated right when I was born. So it's been producing power for El Salvador for 58 years,
yep,
as long as I've been alive. And so, yeah, I mean, he would always have a vision for going to a place that no electricity or part-time electricity, and his job was to provide, electricity 24/7 or clean water or whatever it would be. And every project starts with a vision to really provide something that isn't there.
Okay, now fast forward, you come to the States, and the first time I really hear about you, I'll never forget this. I was at the Leadership Summit at Willow Creek when you were brought on the platform and announced as the leader of Willow Creek Global Leadership Association Summit, right? And you were sitting under then perhaps one of the best vision casters in the world, Bill Hybels, right at the time, and so then you become the leader of the WCA.
Yeah, no doubt. In fact, I was like 29, 30 years old, as I recall, when it was the very first year of the WCA, Willow Creek Association, 1992. And I'll never forget, Craig, that like when I became the leader of this thing, I never really led anything before. And I was like, now what do I do? And I must say, I was deeply impacted by Henry Blackaby and his teaching around experiencing God. If you haven't read that resource, Experiencing God, I encourage you to do that. But let me summarize it for you. The basic message that he was trying to get across is that God is always at work around us. God's movement never stops. He's always at work around us. Our job isn't to set our clever plans and ask God to bless them. Our job is, in fact, to ask God to say, God, reveal to me, give me eyes to see what you're doing around me. And then I adjust my plans to what God is wanting to do. And of course, he'll bless it because he's already there. So that became my prayer at the Willow Creek Association was, God, what are you doing? There were some people that were saying it was going to be a new denomination. I felt no life in that because 70% of our churches were already in denominations, so that didn't seem to make sense, and they had no energy to want to leave theirs. So what was the Willow Creek Association? So really, I began to pray and ask God and ask questions and study the people that were coming to the events that we were hosting. And out of that whole process came the vision that I think God's calling us to serve these progressive church leaders, these innovative church leaders, these leaders that are wanting to kind of almost not reinvent, because it's not about that, but they want to innovate the human parts of church life to better reflect the essence, original part of the Jesus movement in church life. So it's almost like innovating to the original in church life. That's always the process. You don't innovate to the new, you innovate to the original, because every generation, we humans, we leaders, create human-made parts around the Jesus movement, and those human-made parts need to be adjusted as things change from one generation to another. But the essence of the Jesus movement, the essence of the Jesus church, now that part doesn't change, and that's that right there is the part that we were wanting to help leaders change the right thing and not change the right things as well.
Okay, so you're there for the birth of the WCA, and then so how many years did you serve as the leader of the WCA? Where did it move from to before your next career move?
Well, I was, let's see, when we started, it was just a couple hundred churches that first year, and then it went to something closer to 10,000 churches in the membership. Was there 21 years, but only about 20 years as the leader. Initially, I was responsible for the publishing side of it, and then a year or so into it, then I stepped into leadership of it. And then for about 20 years. Well, yeah, right at 20 years, stayed in that role before I moved on to Compassion.
And so by the time you finished up, do you have any idea how many churches were involved in the WCA when you stepped out?
Yeah, membership was around 10,000 churches somewhere.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, reaching, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And so you worked with churches extensively, which is important to this audience. Okay, and then gosh, what was it? 10 years ago, I think, just about, that you received the call to Compassion International.
Yeah, it was actually right at 8 years ago that I did receive that call. And it was so interesting because, Greg, coming to Compassion for me was like coming home. Because my calling to serve the church was clear. And that's what I was doing at the Willow Creek Association. I was serving the church. Our vision was to see it to be normal that every church would thrive. That was the vision, a world where it was normal for churches to thrive. And that's what we were trying to do by serving these leaders that were kind of leading the way for the emerging church with each generation. So that was, that's what we were that was my calling. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with Wes. And I was like, because Wes said, "Hey, Jimmy, I'm going to retire next year."
Yeah, and Wes Stafford was the previous president of Compassion International before you. You'd been there lots and lots of years, done an amazing job.
Yep, absolutely. And Wes had become a very dear friend of mine, very dear friend, as he is a very dear friend of yours as well. In many ways, a good mentor to both of us. And so Wes pulls me aside and he says, because the Willow Creek Association and Compassion were partnering at the time around the Global Leadership Summit. And Wes says, "Jimmy, I'm going to retire next year. And I don't get to vote. I don't get to be on the committee on who will be my successor. But I'm just telling you that in my quiet time, I'm beginning to get some promptings that just maybe God might be leading you to be my successor." And I thought, oh, wow. I mean, God hadn't told me yet. I was on a mission there serving the church. And I said, "Well, Wes, my calling is to serve the church." And he said, "Well, that's why I think this would be a good move because, from my perspective, Wes speaking, I wouldn't want you to see you change your calling. I would like you to keep that calling, but maybe just sit at a different seat at the same table and serve the churches, the kinds of churches serving the kinds of children that you grew up with and that you went to when you were a kid in all those countries." And that was true. God called me to serve the church. I got and received very strong prompting of that back in 1988 and had been doing that for, a couple decades more. And then the next kind of the more refining of that call was, yes, serve the church, but serve the church in some of the toughest, poorest regions of the world to serve the most marginalized and vulnerable children. So my calling just got more sharpened as I came to Compassion and really come full circle. It's been fun to go to many of the countries where I grew up in, and now I visit there through Compassion and go visit my house, where I used to live. And there's one project in Nicaragua that is literally half a kilometer from where I used to live back, decades ago.
Crazy. Okay, so you come to Compassion International, and size of the budget, how many children were sponsored at that time?
Oh, at that time when I came?
Yep.
That's about 1.5 million. And I think our budget, if I recall correctly, is about 600 million at the time, 8 years ago.
And where is it now? Give me both numbers now.
Yeah, so we're serving a little over 2.2 million children, and the budget's 1.1 billion.
Yeah, so just incredible leadership and growth. You led through an unbelievable IT transition and all of your systems and
unbelievable in many ways, good and bad.
That was painful to walk through that with you, brother. And so I've watched that. You've led through an incredible movement of diversity at your executive team level and every level of the organization. It's just been beautiful to watch. And then just the growth of vision. So now with this global organization, Jimmy, how important is your vision casting as the vision caster for Compassion International?
Well, I don't know how important I am to vision casting, but I'll tell you, vision casting and the vision God has for any ministry, is the ball game. I mean, that Where there's lack of vision, people perish. We know that verse, so that part of scripture. So it's just eminently important. And that vision, actually, the reason I say it's not me, it's the vision, is that the vision ought to transcend the particular leader. The vision is bigger than any one person. The vision ought to go on beyond. I'm just stewarding the vision for this season. Now, there's a very important job to steward that vision, no doubt, very important. But the most important thing is that the vision actually is much larger than the leader. It transcends the leader. And I actually, as the steward of it, am the one that does certain functions that help define it, clarify it, spread it, and live it in the organization. Key role, just not the most important role.
There's so much to unpack here just already. Okay, so if there's not a vision, if there's not good vision, that's the ball game. Gosh, I'm thinking about church leaders, church planters, and just what you just said right there. It's the ball game. It's over. Okay. And then walk through what you just said there at the end, your job as the steward of the vision. I didn't catch all of them because you said them so quickly, but live it, define it. Talk about that.
You're one of the functions of leadership is in fact to be student number one, clarifier of where we're wanting to go. And let's just, in talking about leadership, a lot of people talk about leadership as just being about influence. And I think it's more than that. Because leadership, influence can be helping you understand one known thing and another known thing. Like over dinner, I'm going to have you choose chicken over meat. That's influence. Well, chicken and meat are both known commodities. Leadership is something different, much more special. Leadership is taking you from a known here to an unknown there. And because it's always an unknown there, you need another ingredient beyond influence. And that ingredient is courage. Courage is what transforms influence into leadership. So when you're stepping into that unknown place, someone has to define it. Someone has to describe why we cannot stay in the known here and why it is a moral imperative that we go to the unknown there. And so that's where vision fills that gap. And so vision is such a precious thing. But let me go back to the Henry Blackaby thing. Join God in what he's wanting to do. I said this when I first came to compassion. I wouldn't give 2 pennies for what I think about compassion and where it ought to go. I'd give a whole lot, and I'd sacrifice to understand where is God wanting to take compassion. And if I'm a student number one of where God is wanting to take compassion, then I can really get behind it. I can live it. I can clarify it. I can choose and unchoose words to describe it. All of that, those are the functions that a leader must do. And so that's what I did when I came to compassion, just like I did at Willow Creek Association some 20-some years earlier. I began to do really 4 things. And I talked about this when I told staff when I came in. It says, I'm gonna do 4 things. Number 1, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen to you. I'm gonna listen to leaders. I'm gonna listen to God. And then I'm gonna learn from that. And I'm gonna love you in the middle of it. And after listening, learning, and loving the leadership gift, I would have confidence that the leadership spiritual gift that the Lord graciously gave to a group of people, and myself included, that in humility, that leadership gift would begin to develop points of view about where the organization needed to go and how it needed to get where it needed to go. And so that's what I did. And I began I was like a voracious focus group, personal leader, asking a ton of questions and doing surveys and things like that to learn and to and really enter into this space of team discernment, not just me discernment, but team discernment, because God speaks to them too, these key leaders in the ministry. And so paying attention to that is another way of seeing where God wants to take the ministry. And so that's what happened. I began to see where God was wanting to take compassion, and we developed a mission statement that says this. This is that former mentor of mine, you mentioned Bill. He would define vision as that picture of the future that creates energy in you and others. And so that picture of the future for us at Compassion was a world where all children living in poverty are thriving toward their God-given potential. All children living in poverty, thriving toward their God-given potential. That's the vision that got clarified and honed inside of Compassion. Now, our mission was very well known. Releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. That's our mission. That's what we do. But the thing that we do over and over again and stay at it year after year ought to result in a different world. That new place, that unknown place is
okay.
That
So say the vision of Compassion one more time.
Yeah. So the vision is all children living in poverty, thriving toward their God-given potential.
Okay, and so Compassion only works through the local church.
Right.
Okay, so I want to catch this here, church planters. That's why you're so important. No matter what country you're in, watching or listening right now around the world, you matter. Compassion's vision cannot come to fruition.
That's right.
Without you church planters, okay?
Right.
All right? And church plants aren't ever going to minister fully without ministries like Compassion. It's a symbiotic relationship here that we need to have. And because our vision is for every child to have a church. And we see how well that fits together. And that's one of the reasons why this partnership works so well. Jimmy, I need to come back, though. I hate to keep driving you back, but man, I'm thinking about this idea of most people look at a visionary leader, right? And they go, oh yeah, they're on the go and they're hustling and they're making things happen and they're in meetings and they're on Zoom all the time. But the reality is, from what I'm hearing you say, there is this under the water part of the iceberg that's way more important than all of that activity if you're really going to lead well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about where vision comes from, how you grow it, how do you develop it, all that, Greg, I think of 5 things. There are 5 things that I think about when I think about vision and the need for it. And the first thing is to understand where vision comes from. Vision doesn't come from you. It doesn't come from vision. Vision comes from what my former mentor used to say, a holy discontent. Vision comes from the problem. Vision comes from living in what should not be, the wrong that needs to be righted, the injustice that needs to be reversed. You gotta live in the problem deeply enough, because that's what gives you that's the catalyst and conviction that gets behind a vision that gets clarified. We all think that the MLK talk, at the Washington Memorial, the Lincoln Monument was the most amazing vision casting talk of all time there in DC years ago. Well, it was powerful, but it took him being in jail cells. It took him living in the problem of racism at such a deep level that it created a depth of conviction and moral authority that vision stood on. So vision comes from living in the problem that needs to be addressed long enough for conviction at the deepest level to emanate, and it's like it can't stay within you anymore. It's got to explode out of you. And so as you live in that problem, as you live in that holy discontent, then it is that discernment process of listening and learning to understand where is God working, and what is God wanting for this church, this ministry in the future. So that and discernment is more than good judgment. It's God-led good judgment. And then the third piece is to understand your context. This is so important about vision. If you don't understand the context of what you're walking into and what you're going to foist the vision on, you could really do more damage than good. I
think I've done that, Jimmy.
You and I both. I mean, if you have to understand the context really well, because if you don't do that, you won't know how to connect the vision to the context until you know the context. So, what's the history of the context? Have they been following different visions? Are they in a fast growth mode? Are they plateaued? Are they declining? Is this a turnaround? What's the context? That matters. And then timing matters. Again, sometimes you got the right vision at the wrong time. because different things have to come together to really turbocharge a mission. And sometimes you got to wait. Sometimes you got to discern the right timing of when you're going to begin to really roll out that vision, so that that context that you now know can embrace what you need. And sometimes you have the right vision, you don't have the right people. You don't have the right team. And it might be the right vision, but you don't have the capabilities to pull it off. So the vision and the team and the context, that all has to all be, that all has to match. And when you live in that space, in the problem, discerning, context, timing, team, then in that whole process, then you're really trying to work with the blank sheet of paper and select words to describe it better and better and better. And the first words you pick aren't going to be the best ones. I remember I was talking about compassion when I felt like God was calling compassion to be multiple times the size that it was, because of the moral imperative that just in our countries alone, and expansion countries that we plan to expand into, there's 170 million children that could qualify for Compassion's program that are living in poverty. 170 million children. And we're at 2.2 million. That's like around 1% of meeting that need. And we say no. Hear me on this. We say no to 80% of the churches in the field that want to work with us. So it's not as if there isn't demand for it. It's like having a store, getting through 20% of your day and shutting it down, even though there's a long line of people outside your store wanting to come in. You say, I'm sorry, no, we're not good. Come back tomorrow, And so there is a moral imperative to say yes more to those that want to be served, that are in need, right now. And so as I thought about that, I began to think, I think the Lord wants us to scale the ministry, to grow exponentially. Well, those words in a ministry environment sound more like math, sounds more like Harvard Business School. It doesn't sound like ministry. So the way I talk about it now, through a series of just evolutions of the words, I talk about it in the form of advancing outcomes with more children more quickly. It's the same thing. One sounds like math and business school. The other one sounds like ministry, and can connect with people who have that ministry heart. They love children. They love children. They're here because they love children. So it's more children, right? Yeah. More quickly, right? Yeah. Advancing outcomes in their lives. Yeah. So it's advancing outcomes with more children more quickly. That's like our priority now, so we can realize that vision as we do the mission. So the way I talk about, where our priority is in our more nearer term vision that informs our plans, that heads us on our way toward that longer term aspirational vision, that evolves. You got to keep finding fresh words to describe it in ways that are connecting to the neighbors you're called to serve.
Okay, Jimmy, talk about just a few of the challenges you face. It sounds like, okay, we get it all wordsmithed. It's all great. But there are challenges to keeping vision white hot. There are challenges to accomplishing and moving the organization, the church plant towards the vision.
Yeah, no doubt. Because if it's a great vision, if it's a good vision, if it's a God-inspired vision, you will have enemies. There is an opposition here. There really is. Sometimes, there's clearly the evil one that wants to work against what God is wanting to do in this world. So there's certainly spiritual opposition. But there's also the fact that in our world, the people that we lead, every one of them, and we got 3,400 staff, 100,000 workers, frontline volunteers, workers on the front lines of our ministry, all of them have this wonderful, amazing gift from God called free will.
Wonderful.
And because everyone has that free will, everybody has an opinion about the vision, about you, how you're doing it, what the strategy is. So in trying to align, and my challenge is across 35 countries, all those cultures, all those languages, we have to translate what I say oftentimes into 9 different languages so that it could connect with people. So there's socioeconomic chasms, cultural chasms, language chasms, geography chasms, and I'm trying to align the whole thing around a core vision and a mission.
Okay, and that sounds crazy, but as a church planter and church leader, we need to be aware of we have the same chasms, and they're not the same categories, but they are the same, very similar. There are chasms we have to cross when vision casting.
Absolutely. Every one of them. That is actually the function and the job of the leader. And so the primary thing that I got to do in contributing to that is really living it, believing it. People can tell when a leader doesn't have the deepest level of conviction in their soul about the direction. There's doubt. There's insecurity there. So, I mean, I have to live it, which means I have to do all the hard soul work to answer the question, do I really believe this? Do I really believe this? Am I willing to sacrifice for this? And at that level of conviction. And then as I live it, to evangelize it, find fresh and new ways to talk about it. But then probably the most important thing I got to do in that vision is somehow get it inside other people and really have their free will embrace it and accept it. Can't force it on them. But there are things that I can do to as I listen to them, to help them in the adoption process of that vision. And when they adopt that vision, then really seeing them get behind it, then vision is starting to get traction. When you hear other people say, yeah, we want a world where all children in poverty are thriving toward their God-given potential, and then they're spreading it in the same way that they got it.
And sacrificing and living it.
Right, absolutely. For sure.
Jimmy, we close this our podcast time together with 3 questions for every leader that I'm interviewing. Here's the first one. What do you wish pastors would do more of?
Oh, man, I wish, and I say this in all humility, and I'm actually preaching to myself as a leader when I say this, so take it in that light. But I wish that pastors would invest in their souls more than they invest in their ministry. Now, here's why I say that. The most significant contribution you will make to the kingdom of heaven and, in fact, your ministry is the person, the leader you're becoming. It's the person you're becoming. Even more so than what you're doing. And we do compelling work. We're trying to, introduce people to Jesus for their souls to be fully saved eternally. And we're serving the poor. I mean, how important is that? It's super important. But 1 Corinthians 13 says that we could do the most important stuff, but if it's not emanating out of love, and Jesus is love, God is love, if it's not emanating from that soul, that healthy you, that person who is becoming and taking on the character of Christ, it just doesn't have meaning. What you do in Christ is the fruit of who you are in Christ, or it's not fruit. It's human striving. It's something else, but it's not spiritual fruit. So, and I remember I used to do some mentoring retreats with Henry Cloud years ago. We'd do like 15, 20 pastors at a time. And Henry always asked that group of pastors this question the night before. And the question was, how many of you have at least one fully disclosing relationship beyond your spouse? One fully disclosing relationship in your life? And the hard news is that about 60-70% would say they didn't have that. They didn't have one fully disclosing relationship in their life beyond their spouse. And so we would talk about that. And I've just come to firmly believe, for myself and other leaders, life and leadership is hard. Life and leadership alone is impossible. If you do or try to do leadership alone, you will end up in a ditch. It's just a matter of time. If you don't do the hard work of working the inside life of who you are, those dysfunctions will get played out and acted out publicly in ways that could be destructive to you, to your family, loved ones, friends, and those that you lead. So investing in your soul. And I just want to ask you this. Do you have a strategic plan for your church or ministry? Probably you do. do you have a plan, a strategic plan for your soul development? I don't know. I mean, I do now. I
You know,
did.
Jimmy, that's really fascinating because I presented to the Stadia board this past year all of our strategic plan and goals for 2021. And do you know that our board, and I love them for this, said, okay, 30 days from now, you need to come back with us with a strategic plan for your soul and life.
Man.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
yes, I wish every elder board of directors of ministries would do that, and to invest in your leader. Our board graciously allows me to have a coach. If you're going to lead, you need a coach. I was an athlete in my former life when I was young, and
An Olympic athlete, but we'll go on. That's another story.
I know the story. But I can't imagine training without a coach. I just can't. You'd never do athletics without a coach. You just wouldn't. But we do leadership all the time without coaches.
Okay, so we can't. We're gonna run long because this is so important. So, you're 58. I'm 58 years old. You have a coach. I have a coach as well. I have a spiritual coach. I have not only a spiritual coach, but I have two board members that are meeting with me every other month just to make sure I'm doing okay spiritually.
Wow.
It's that important for us, right?
Totally. It's the ball game. It really is the ball game. And sometimes people say when I say who you're becoming in Christ is more important than even what you do in Christ, they're like, wait, don't you care about results? If you knew me, you'd know I care about results.
You and me both. Yep.
In the whole strengths thing, my top strength is achiever, and then it's competition. So I care about results. I just know it has no meaning unless it's a fruit of the person I'm becoming.
Okay, question number 2. What do you wish pastors would do less of? Flip the coin.
Yeah. Reinforce the parts of church that are human created that sometimes work at odds with the essence of what church is. So we build forms all the time. We need to. There's nothing necessarily wrong or right about this particular form, that particular form of structure and ministry. And do you do an organ or a piano or a guitar? Those are forms of church, and so every generation, because people change, the church has to change the forms, and the church has always changed their form. Look at 2,000 years of church history. Forms have changed for sure, because those are kind of the human created parts around the essence of the Jesus movement, for sure. And it's the job of a leader to keep our congregations understanding what is the form and what is the essence, what is the function. And to know that function, that essence, our theology, the core of who we are, the koinonia, the community, that part of church never changes. And that's why I keep saying you innovate to the old. We have the odd deal in the church that we always innovate to the original. And we change the human parts of it. But here's what happens. If a leader isn't clear with their congregation between the essence and the form, the congregation begins to love it all. And it's okay to love it all, but you can't love it all equally. And they get so attached to the form. That when a leader then wants to change some of the form to better connect with an emerging generation, then all of a sudden everybody's going, wow, no, you're changing church. And you can't do that.
And right now with everything, with the digital explosion and opportunities, I mean, that piece of wisdom right there is more important than ever because every church is experiencing that right now. Okay, question number 3. What's been one thing that a pastor has done that's been especially helpful to you?
Model what they preach.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, it's just model what they preach. It's I'll follow that.
Yeah.
I'll follow that. And when I see that, I want to model that too. So that's probably the most powerful thing you can give to me as a congregant.
Well, Santiago, this short time together has just reminded me why I love and respect and enjoy working with you so much. Thank you so deeply for sharing your life and learnings with us.
Thank you, brother. Love you too, Greg, and look forward to the next time the Lord leads our paths to cross.